Anxious investors continue to focus on both Wall Street and Washington and Europe. And joining us with his market perspective is Stanley Crouch, CIO of Aegis Capital. Stanley, good to see you.
Good morning.
Everything's better now that we're going to have a debt deal, right?
Well, if you believe in the 10-year, it is. Ironically, one of the things we've observed is here we are on the precipice of perhaps not paying, and yet there's a rally in the 10-year.
So you manage money.
Yes.
You've got, I don't know how many treasuries in your portfolio. Let's just presuppose it. And there's a downgrade. What do you do with those?
Well, structurally, the Treasury market and related markets, agencies, et cetera, aren't going away. It's just too much of a dominant world allocation. So whether we're downgraded or not, obviously a non-payment would have a big effect.
Sure, but that's not what we're talking about.
Correct.
Right.
So we're hopefully past that point, although the vote's yet to come. But structurally, the portfolio managers have no choice but to participate. Now, what the spreads will be are yet to be determined. And I think that a downgrade, if it comes, and if you're listening to S&P and Moody's, particularly S&P, they've laid out very specifically what they expected or required to happen to avoid it. So they really did it in two steps. They first in April came out.
But do you actually care what they have to say about this? I mean, that's fundamentally the big question that people keep asking.
I mean, do you sell any treasuries because they get downgraded by S&P and Moody's?
No. No, but
do many
does it
people
affect
sell?
your portfolio?
Oh, sure.
It might affect your portfolio.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because it does affect the portfolios. There's a lot of knock-on effect. The S&P did a report about the knock-on in munis, in quite a few different categories. So.
And then for your blended, if you need a double A, you've got to sell it.
Right.
You sell the losers, not the winners, right?
That's another issue. There's structural requirements of the ratings.
It feels like today, though, that the markets have now gone back to focusing on issues such as, is China slowing down? What is going on in Europe? The news out today, the Spanish prime minister isn't going on vacation because that country needs to borrow money on Thursday, and their interest rates are rising dramatically.
Absolutely.
How worried are you about Europe, and does it impact what you're investing in?
Yes, of course it does. We're delevering as a world from a credit bubble. And that's a multi-year process in our view. It's not an asset bubble. We had that sort of thing back in the RTC days in the early 90s. This is a different situation. This is a massive deleveraging across the world. Sovereign, personal. If we look at what's happening in people's own pocketbooks, they're definitely doing that. Corporations have done it to some extent. They're hoarding cash. This is potentially very negative. Look, the GDP revisions drove a lot of this. That was quite disturbing, and they revised all the way back to 2003. So when you think about it, we had much lower growth than was thought.
Joe, he's adding to my anxiety.
Well, I mean
that. I just want you to
one
know.
thing that all of us can agree on, and we'll never disagree with, is that we've got a real growth problem, and it would solve so many problems if we could come back. I mean, we're craving growth so much, and here we are in this still over-leveraged consumer, and it's going to still take time, and it's when we need it most.
But that's what we need it most, and that's why I've been talking about this other issue.
But the thing is, you can't expect.
Need it most means what? QE3? Is that what we're talking about here?
I don't know about QE3 or Keynesian stimulus to try and get it. I just think you need to just let things lie where they will. Let unencumbered private business once again, and they are encumbered right now.
Well, I think we've got a real problem because we need more certainty with regard to our tax system. Right. We've got a problem in regulation. We've got two major. Well, we've got the healthcare bill. We've got the Dodd-Frank bill. We still haven't defined a lot of those regulations. There's trillions parked on corporate balance sheets. One of the things we ought to think about as part of comprehensive tax reform, a deduction for dividends distributed by corporations, which would eliminate double taxation, which would say either you invest it for growth and jobs or you distribute it so we can get growth and jobs. It doesn't always have to be government money.
Right.
But this administration doesn't want to own any of this, right? I mean, we had Barney Frank on. Why is unemployment so high? Because of Japan, because of Europe. It's not because of anything that they've done.
There's a big piece in the journal that Gene Sperling from over the weekend, basically saying that it was due to the debt uncertainty and Japan.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
There were a lot of structural problems, let's just be honest, that it was a problem. And was it exacerbated by the government? Perhaps. But to suggest that somehow it was the government, I think is too far.
Sure. Here's the thing we'll never know. If we hadn't had intervention if we hadn't saved the banks, if we hadn't done TARP, if we hadn't had QE1 and 2, where would we be?
You didn't say stimulus.
Well, I don't call it stimulus.
You didn't say the $800 billion stimulus.
Well,
you said
aren't all of
TARP.
those things stimulus to some extent?
No, but you didn't mention the $800 billion.
Look, I think people should pay rapt attention to Mr. Walker. He's been warning about this pre-crisis for years. He was in a position to know. He knows the math. Everything is always in the math. This compounding effect in reverse. Look, we use compound income models in our portfolios, equities, debt, etc., and it works exponentially over time. The reverse is true when you're a debtor, and that's the big problem. And he's trying to say, come into the middle of reality, away from the fringes, and realize it's a revenue problem and it's a spending problem in concert, and it can't be solved without both.
Yeah, but we're back to it's chicken egg. How do you get revenue? From growth or from raising taxes? And does raising taxes hurt the growth?
You get it through comprehensive tax reform.
We need
that simplifies the base, reduces the rates, and generates more revenue. Sure. And we need to get the power of compounding working for us. The longer you delay tough choices, the more compounding works against us. We're a debtor now. We're not a creditor. We're a debtor.
One of the other issues before I came in, I looked up the nominal marginal tax rates. In the 50s, arguably one of the greatest growth periods in the history of any economy, we had up to 91, 92% marginal tax rate.
You don't want to go back there.
We don't want to go back there, but the point is...
But a really messy tax code with so many deductions, it was garbage.
But things that we assume are true may not necessarily be true. I would prefer to think of the actuary...
Well, I'm sure you do. You heard 90% and you're ready to hug him.
No. I'm not advocating... Look, I'm a registered independent. I'm a realist, and that's why I subscribe to Mr.
But you
Walker.
say things that we thought were true weren't necessarily true. But they were all, like she said, the rich people were probably paying 10% and 90% margin.
Because they were deducting everything in their
really
money.
90.
So that's one of the real keys. It's the effective tax rate.
Exactly.
That matters, okay?
And right now, for the top 1%, it's probably what you said.
For the top 1%, it's 18.8%, primarily because of dividends and capital gains. And 51% of Americans,
I thought you wanted to go back to 90%.
No, I want to bring them down. I want to bring them down. I want to take the loopholes out. We got to go.
Thanks for putting up with us.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much.